Just want to welcome Congressman Higgins. It's nice to see you again. Was in Washington, D.C. a week or two ago. It's great to chat about issues and the friendship between Canada and the United States. Congressman Higgins serves on the House Committee on Ways and Means, where he's also a member of the Subcommittee on Health, Trade and Social Security. In addition, he currently serves as a member of the House Committee on Budget. He is a co-chair of the Northern Border Caucus, from which he advocates for federal policies that recognize the unique needs of northern border communities. Congressman, we normally give a 5 minutes opening statement, but I'm more than happy to give you the latitude to make the statement you'd like to make. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate this very much. The House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade for calling this meeting as quickly as you have in the aftermath of the meeting that we held in my office in Washington, D.C. I want you to know that I was at a groundbreaking today for the new Buffalo Bills National Football League franchise stadium. It's a $1.5 billion project, but the owner of the Buffalo Bills and the National Football League commissioner thanked the people of Canada for providing a significant ticket buying base, fan base for our professional franchise. And the point that he was making was that Buffalo is a relatively small market, and it's very difficult to sustain a National Football League franchise. But because of our friends and fellow Bills fans in Canada, they, in part, made this day possible to build a new stadium which will keep the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo for 30 years. So we want to thank you for your friendship and for your most recent contributions to the viability of our economy in Buffalo and Western New York. I want to especially thank Mr. Tony Baldinelli for offering the motion to convene this meeting and study. As a representative of Niagara Falls, I appreciate Mr. Baldinelli's continued friendship and partnership. As you know, there's a unique relationship between the United States and Canada, and I'll just tell you quickly my story because it's not unique. It's a story of Buffalo and Western New York as it relates to Southern Ontario, and more specifically the Niagara region, places like Bay Beach, Ontario, Crystal Beach, Thunder Bay, Shirkston, all of those areas that historically we call cottage communities. I grew up, I spent my summers along the Canadian shores of Lake Erie. I played ice hockey up in Fort Erie, Ontario, a place called The Barn, which is no longer there. And it was very easy to traverse the border, and that ease of travel accrued economically and in terms of life quality to the benefit of both people within the Niagara region of Southern Ontario and Western New York. As you know, in 2021, there was a budget proposal to create a vacant and underutilized tax on properties owned by foreigners. My understanding was that was put in place to address a problem specific to Toronto and to Vancouver, where national interests were buying large swaths of property and then keeping them vacant for long periods of time, perhaps speculating in terms of real estate investment. The problem, as I read, as it related to Toronto and Vancouver and the country as a whole, was that it was taking supply of housing off the market for a period of time, and that would create a demand issue where property costs were rising for Canadian citizens. The problem is it also included the Niagara region. And as I said, a cottage is usually a small home in close proximity to a beach or a park, and it is used seasonally. It's not underutilized. It's used fully for the seasonal purpose for which those homes were built. And we have heard from more than 400 constituents who have owned property in Canada, in the Niagara region, in many cases for 30, 40 years. It's multi-generational. And I appealed to the members who came to visit me in my Washington office, and I appreciate very much this follow-up. And I would ask for consideration of possibly providing a carve-out for a piece of property that is considered to be a cottage near a lake or a park that is seasonal in nature because, as I said, these properties are fully utilized within the season. So Americans will typically, go to Canada on Memorial Day, which is our unofficial start of summer, and stay, in their Canadian cottages through Labor Day. And now they're being taxed at 1% because of this vacant and underutilized tax. So that's the purpose of appearing before you today. Again, I appreciate very, very much the long historical ties economically and in terms of life quality between the United States and Canada. I remember fondly on September 11, 2001, when the American airspace was shut down. 38 passenger planes were forced out of the air, and they landed at a small town called Gander, Newfoundland. And they stayed there for weeks and in many cases months. And they were treated as friends and family. And I think that is typical of the relationship that has occurred between the United States and Canada. So with that, I'd be glad to take questions, to provide whatever additional information you may need relative to our efforts to ask for reconsideration of the vacant and underutilized property tax.
Thank you very much, Congressman. We'll turn to our rounds of questions, and the first round it will be Mr. Baldinelli for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Representative Higgins, for joining us this afternoon, and thank you for all that you do to promote the binational region and the strong ties that bind both our countries and the residents that live in our communities. As I said earlier, it's not an international border for those that live in the area. It's just a river that divides two friends and families, in fact. And so thank you for everything that you've done. We had the pleasure of meeting several months ago at your Buffalo office, as well as just recently in Washington to discuss several kind of binational issues. And of course, the unused housing tax issue came up. And from our perspective, and just a little information, is maybe perhaps some history for the committee. When were you first appraised of it? When were you beginning to get contacts? How many contacts have you had? And some of your efforts working with your American colleagues to notify Canada of the concerns that you have.
Yeah, thank you, Member of Parliament Baldinelli. We were, people started to get, they were contacted, and as you know, when the original bill was proposed, again, it was explicit in what it was attempting to mitigate or to fix, and that was again international interests purchasing large swaths of property in big cities, driving up the cost of those properties. And as the evolution of the bill was moving, it began to define what other properties would be included in there, and it kept getting closer and closer to Southern Ontario and the Niagara region. So it was about midpoint last year. And we made efforts through the ambassador's office, both the U.S. ambassador to Canada and the Canadian ambassador to the United States, that this is a concern. We needed to watch it, and began to make that distinction between what is a seasonal cottage and what is large apartment buildings being purchased for different purposes. And so it was the middle of last year.
I found it interesting. I was just reading up on some of the efforts that you've done, and you undertook an online survey with the residents that would contact your office, and some of the the notions about the long-standing relationships these residents have had of, I believe it was over 160 people responded. Nearly 30% of responders have owned their Canadian property for over 50 years. And then with close to 40 owning their Canadian home between 20 and 49 years. Again, going back to that relationship that exists, people come, they don't just come for a finite vacation period. Because we're so close, people can stay in Crystal Beach, for example, and then just go to work in the morning in Buffalo and in Western New York. So they have those long-standing ties. I talked earlier about Cherry Hill Golf Course, established in 1922 by 9 Americans. And the one Roman Catholic Church, St. George's, celebrated its 100th anniversary. And in the summertime, the congregation swells because of our American visitors. And people don't understand when the government tries to take an overarching policy with a broad brush, sometimes they miss the intricacies and the carve-outs that need to be done. And I just wonder if you could comment on that.
Well, Tony, I think you nailed it better than I could have. I'm familiar with St. George's Church because I used to go to church there when I would spend my summers in Canada at Bay Beach in Crystal Beach. And again, this is, as you point out, this is a way of life. I can remember, as a very, very young kid through adulthood, spending summers at Bay and Crystal Beach. And we believe, we were always greeted as friends and as neighbors. We feel as though when people are living in Canada on a seasonal basis, they are net contributors to the economy. And we welcome our Canadian friends into Western New York in the same way. There is a ski village 60 miles south of Buffalo called Ellicottville. And a lot of Canadian citizens own condominiums there. The way that you know that is because during December, January, February, March, you go into the town of Ellicottville and half of the town is Ontario license plates. And I think that is the great benefit for both Canadians and Americans to live on a border community. And to promote that, I think is in the best interest of both countries. There's 120 land ports of entry. The second largest crossing between the United States and Canada is the Peace Bridge, and that connects Buffalo to Fort Erie and Southern Ontario through the whole province of Ontario. So it's a lot of common interests, a lot of common history, a lot of common culture, and we want to preserve that and strengthen it moving forward. I was talking to some of my folks today about, we're surrounded by friends and fish, not by hostility, not by instability. We're trading partners, we're friends. Our economies are deeply integrated. I think what we learned during the pandemic for 36 months, my federal government did not handle that issue well. And the United States and Canada, federal government should have been working more closely, coordinating a communication strategy and policy as it related to COVID. And I just think that, we should learn from that and bring our ties closer together.